This video is brought to you by Nebula. Having led the Conservative Party since November last year, Kemi Badenoch hasn't exactly hit the ground running. The Tories are still fighting reform in the polls. The public largely think that the Tories are not ready for government, and people still don't think Badenoch would be a good Prime Minister. The problem is that Badenoch hasn't really done anything as leader yet. She set out no policy vision and has not yet indicated exactly how she wants the Tory party to approach the next 5 years, and appears reluctant to talk to the media, other than the right-wing Spectator, for whom she previously worked. With all this in mind, some media commentators have started to suggest that her tenure as leader may already be in trouble, and that, without some serious action soon, it's quite possible that she won't be the person to lead them into the next general election. If you want more UK political drama from us, then check out our podcast Starmageddon, where we track the successes and failures of this new Labour government. Find it over on the TLDR Podcast YouTube channel or in your favourite podcast app. Now, to understand exactly what's gone wrong for Badenoch, we first need to understand exactly how we got here. As you already know, the Conservatives properly began to tank under Boris Johnson. While his unrelenting ability to attract scandal and controversy was frequently dismissed by his colleagues for a number of years, there was only so much they could take. It was the Chris Pincher scandal that was the final straw, and led to so many ministers resigning that Johnson had to resign as Prime Minister. This scandal highlighted just how unpopular the Conservatives had become, and how people no longer felt that they could trust the Tories in government. The rise and fall of Liz Truss certainly didn't help restore any credibility either, and by the time Sunak became leader, the Tories were languishing in the polls, separately trying to fight off Reform UK. For his part, Sunak tried to have his cake and eat it, at times trying to come across as a technocratic relative centrist, and at others trying to tack right and appeal to the libertarian Truss faction. While he lost the general election last year, Badenoch's pitch to the Conservative Party was that she'd embolden the right of the party as leader, arguing that not all cultures are equally valid, that businesses are closing because the burden of regulation is too high, and that the UK should leave international frameworks, like the European Court of Human Rights, if necessary. Then, upon being elected leader of the Tories, Badenoch claimed that she would move in a new direction, and would be a break from the mistakes of her predecessors. This was welcomed by many on the right of the party, who were concerned about the rise of reform. They now had a candidate that had been demonstrably right-wing as a minister in previous governments, had continued to make promises of right-wing policies in the run-up to the leadership election, and had effectively admitted that the refusal for the previous leader to move further right was a mistake. All that they needed to do was sit tight and wait for her to take the fight to Labour, dragging the Tories further right and depriving Reform UK of their USP, being the only truly viable, truly right-wing party in British politics. For the most part, Badenoch doled out the same attack lines against Labour you'd expect from any opposition party, announced no new policies, and gave very few media interviews. During the farmers' protests, it was Farage and his allies that managed to make the most high-profile criticism of Labour, appearing prominently not just on TV, but on social media too. He produced videos of him going to family farms, discussing the impact of Labour's policies on actual farmers, gave interviews to LBC and GB News, and was featured in news headlines at the same time. Throughout all of this, Badenoch was simply unable to take such a prominent role in the opposition to Labour. This seems to be exactly how each policy issue goes. It's Farage that appears to have the leading role in making the argument against Labour every single time. Arguably, this is one of the main driving factors behind Reform maintaining their strong polling, and in some cases polling so strong that they're actually ahead of the Conservatives. So it was clear that Badenoch needed to change course, and that's what many expected from her speech on the 16th of January. Her main message in the speech was that the Tory party was under new leadership, and that under her, the Tories are going to be telling the British people the truth, even when it's difficult to hear. She then went through a list of problems with the country, including business regulation, our fragile energy supply, a lack of productivity, the fertility crisis, hostile actors abroad, and high immigration, with her ending by explaining that we are going to give you your country back. This seems to be a way of turning the Farage problem on its head. Throughout the Brexit years, Farage would rouse right-wing audiences by declaring, "We want our country back." Telling voters that you'll be the one to deliver it is a way of separating reform from the Tories. The former identifies the problems, and the latter fixes them. The more you look at the speech, the clearer this becomes. In the speech, she highlighted her background as an engineer, and used this to argue that she's fascinated by how to make things work. She was deferential to Farage in the Q&A afterwards, and she highlighted the work she did as a minister to fight against transgender legislation. Now, there is a chance that this framing's successful. It's true that Reform has a lot more hurdles to overcome if they want to form a government at the next election, and if those on the right of UK politics do want a right-wing government to succeed Starmer, then the Tories probably are still the best bet. However, the issue is that as much as Badenoch admits that she'll tell the truth and admit that the previous Tory government made mistakes, this comes across as somewhat hollow if it isn't actually backed up with actual policy solutions. And the fact that Badenoch refuses to offer any of these solutions until 2027 will really hold this strategy back. Her logic is likely that there isn't going to be an election until 2029. Now, this is probably true. This may not be her first big hurdle, though. The Tories are historically ruthless with their leaders, and if they don't see quick turnarounds in the polls, they topple and move on. As former Tory leader William Hague once put it, the Tory party is an absolute monarchy, regulated by regicide. Without being more forthcoming about her ideology as leader, and without putting forward an actual plan, it's entirely plausible that Reform continues to grow, and Tory MPs start looking for a new leader. Like a lot of things, this whole situation is very much in a state of flux. With us entering a new year and Trump re-entering the White House, well, the world has felt more stable, hasn't it? Every day we're faced with weird headlines, from Trump's attempts to take over Canada and Elon's wild ride in Europe, or even Trump trying to swap New Jersey for a shiny Charizard on the playground. Okay, that last one might not be real, but we do dive into the chaotic world of US politics in our series WTF USA. That's our series where we explain everything that's happened across the pond in the land of the free. Because while the election might be over, with Trump in the Oval Office, the number of WTF moments only looks likely to increase. Unlike some of our other more serious videos, the tone of WTF USA is more light-hearted, and takes something of an irreverent look at what's going on. If you're interested, WTF can be found exclusively on Nebula. Now, if you didn't know, Nebula is an independent, creator-owned streaming platform that specialises in thoughtful content. Over there, you can find creators like Wendover Productions, Real Life Law, and Legal Eagle, with many of them releasing their very own original series on the platform. We're super proud of WTF USA, and we hope that with your support, we'll be able to make other interesting, weird, and entertaining series with Nebula in the future. So signing up genuinely helps TLDR to grow and expand. You can also watch every normal TLDR video on Nebula ad-free, and in some instances before they land on YouTube. If you're not a member already, click our link in the description to get 40% off. We really hope you check out the series, and as always, thanks for your support.